I would like to introduce Dr. David Landers. Dr. Dave has been with St. Mike's since 1982, where he was a student mental health counselor, director of the Student Resource Center, faculty athletics representative to the NCAA, and is currently Emeritus Associate Professor of Psychology. Dr. Landers is most well known for his work with gender issues by first originating a course on men and masculinities designed to bring awareness to gender stereotypes, gender fluidity, sexual orientation, toxic masculinity, and sexual violence. This later led to the writing of his best-selling book, I Wish He'd Taught Me How to Shave, a powerful message about the relationships of young adults with their fathers, and derived from a compilation of student essays. Dr. Landers speaks around the country on various topics related to all of this, and is a co-founder of Outright Vermont, Vermont Cares, and brought Hope Happens Here to St. Mike's, which is a national suicide prevention program. For those of you who saw his bio, picture of Yoda there is earned because Dr. Dave has earned his nickname because he exudes wisdom, love, and peace with every step he takes. So Dr. Dave is going to talk about trauma doesn't mean traumatized. Hit it, Dr. Dave Landers.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for signing up for today's part 2 of the 5-part webinar on trauma and resilience. It's sponsored by Champlain College, and I want to thank both Champlain College and Kim Quinn, Dr. Kim Quinn, for hosting this important and timely series, and for inviting me to be a part of it. Last week, Dr. Quinn helped us to better understand the role that our brain plays in dealing with trauma. What I'd like to do today is to provide a framework for our understanding of what trauma is, how it impacts us, and how we can and do keep trauma from traumatizing us. Everyone experiences trauma. It is a part of life. Too often people feel that every trauma ends up being traumatic, numbing, destabilizing, and paralyzing. In this half hour, we will look at examples of various traumas and how our unique perspective as educators may be impacted by the traumas we seem to be surrounded with these days. When I use the term educators to describe us, what I mean is that we are all educators. Whether we work in admissions, financial aid, marketing, support services for students, career development, personal counseling, health services, student affairs, housing, registration, food service, safety and security, administration, or if we're in the classroom, teaching students our content area and sharing our expertise. We are all educators, and I maintain that our chosen roles place us in a very unique and very challenging position when it comes to trauma. I'd like you to think back in your own lives to when you made the decision to become an educator. That decision was impacted perhaps by a wonderful teacher you had, someone who worked in a school who genuinely cared about you, or maybe it was parental influences or role models in your lives. The reasons that we joined as educators are as varied as the people who are participating in this webinar. I'd like you to please keep this in mind as we proceed to better understanding trauma. Also, I would like to ask you to challenge yourselves. Given everything that is going on in our world today, and especially in the field of education, are the reasons that you decided to become an educator still as important to you today as when you made that initial decision? So kind of keep that in mind as we go through this. Trauma can be defined as follows. In general, trauma is defined as a psychological, emotional response to an event or an experience that is deeply distressing or disturbing. When loosely applied, this trauma definition can refer to something upsetting, something that's being involved in an accident, having an illness or an injury, losing a loved one, or going through a divorce. Trauma can be and often is very personal. I was 15 when I walked out onto the porch of my house and found my father dead. That was a trauma. I could have folded up in a corner and become numb and paralyzed, but instead I grew up very, very fast. That is what was necessary under those circumstances. In my first teaching experience, I worked in Pontiac, Michigan. My first contract was for $5,200 for a year. And one of my homeroom students, an amazing, wonderful young man, 15 years old, Tommy Eldridge, he was a 10th grader. He was shot and killed after he had been robbed on his paper route of his paper money. And he told the police. Before the two young men who robbed him were arrested, they shot and killed him. So as a new, very naive educator, the trauma of that event could have had me running for the door, never to return to a classroom. Yet here I am, 54 years later. I still love teaching. I don't do it anymore. I'm retired, but I have never merely liked teaching. I loved teaching. I have never merely, liked it. Another challenge to you, what is it that keeps you from running out that door today? I was 37 when I was first diagnosed with cancer. It was melanoma, which I knew, having lost an uncle to melanoma, was 60% fatal. When I got the diagnosis, I cried. I asked, why me? Why not me? I told myself, this isn't fair. No, it's not. I was convinced that I would die soon. Obviously, I didn't. Well, again, looking back from my current age of 76, I could have curled up in a corner and died. I fought. I also had an ulcer that same year and realized that Pontiac was killing me. And so I left my students, I left Pontiac, I left my friends, because realizing that that was an unhealthy and toxic environment was something that I couldn't continue to deal with. The Ku Klux Klan had blown up the school buses. My students literally were killing each other, and it was just a horrible, horrible situation. I was fortunate enough to be hired by St. Michael's College, where I was, when I was, a couple years later, when I was once again diagnosed with melanoma, I only missed a half a day of work. I learned early on, very young, that it is not the event, but how we deal with the event that matters. I'll repeat that. I learned young that it is not the event, but how we deal with the event that matters. And everyone processes a trauma differently because we all face them through the lens of our prior experiences in our lives. For example, one person might be upset and fearful after going through a hurricane, but someone else might have lost family and barely escaped from a flooded home during Hurricane Katrina. In this case, a minor Category 1 hurricane may bring up traumatic flashbacks of their terrifying experience. And there are different kinds of trauma. And Kim mentioned some of these last week. There's complex trauma. Complex trauma happens repetitively. It often results in direct harm to the individual. The effects of complex trauma are cumulative. They're also generational, or they can be. The way we experience trauma frequently transpires within a particular time frame, or within a particular or specific relationship, and often in a specific setting. So it can be cumulative as well as generational. PTSD is a relatively new term, been around for maybe 10, 12 years, I think. Post-traumatic stress disorder can develop after a person has been exposed to a terrifying event or has been through an ordeal in which intense physical harm occurred or was threatened. Sufferers of this PTSD have persistent and frightening thoughts and memories of their ordeal. We first started recognizing this and identifying it and dealing with it when we started to see people who are coming back from having been in war. And then there's developmental trauma disorder. Developmental trauma disorder is a recent term in the study of psychology. This disorder forms during a child's first 3 years of life. The result of abuse, neglect, and/or abandonment, developmental trauma interferes with the infant or child's neurological, cognitive, and psychological development. It disrupts the victim's ability to attach to an adult caregiver. An adult who inflicts developmental trauma usually doesn't do it intentionally. Rather, it happens because they are not aware of the social and emotional needs of children. And here's some trauma symptoms. Often shock and denial are typical reactions to a traumatic event. Over time, these emotional responses may fade, but a survivor may also experience reactions long-term. Here's some of those reactions: anger, persistent feelings of sadness and despair, flashbacks, unpredictable emotions, physical symptoms such as nausea and headaches, intense feelings of guilt as if they are somehow responsible for the event, an altered sense of shame, and feelings of isolation and hopelessness. So some of the above information comes from the Center for Treatment of Anxiety and Mood Disorders. Trauma can be defined or understood that it is not enough to have experienced one or more traumatic events. To be traumatized means that individuals have been affected by those traumas. It means that their ability to function has been impaired. People have some emotional or behavioral problems as a result of the trauma that they experienced. We also know that trauma produces anxiety. Anxiety is the #1 reason why the general public, and college students in particular, seek out personal counseling in counseling centers across this country. Anxiety is defined as feelings of fear or apprehension. As I've taught all of my psychology students over the years, anxiety manifests itself in 3 different and sometimes concurrent ways. Cognitively, in terms of our thoughts. And an example of that, I'm currently reading a book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. One of the things he writes about, he says, quote, "What could happen based on my deepest fears? What could happen based on my deepest fears mattered more than what did happen to me. I believed violence was stalking me, but in truth, I was being stalked inside my own head." Anxiety can also manifest itself somatically. Our heart rate increases. Our palms get sweaty. We get diarrhea. We may feel faint. It also manifests itself behaviorally. If I fear something, someplace, some event, I simply don't go there, period. Now, how does all of this apply to us as educators? Once again, I ask you to think about how you responded or were impacted by or reacted to the following. 1. 21 years ago, in 1999, 13 people were killed and an additional 200 were injured when a gunman opened fire in Columbine High School in Colorado. All of a sudden, did this mean that schools, the place where we felt safe, where we worked, where our students were educated, was no longer safe? 2. September 11th, 2001, 2,977 people were killed and over 6,000 were injured when terrorists flew planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Did this mean all of a sudden that New York City was no longer safe? Were airplanes no longer safe? Was the Pentagon no longer safe? In 2012, 12 people were killed and 70 others injured at the showing in a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, of the movie Dark Knight Rises. So now, in addition to high schools, New York City, airplanes, the Pentagon, did it also mean that movie theaters were no longer safe? Right before Christmas in 2012 in Sandy Hook, New Jersey, 26 people were killed. That included 20 children who were ages 6 and 7. Did this now mean that even little children, elementary school children, were no longer safe in the United States, along with high school students? We worked in schools. What did that mean to us? In Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, a group of parishioners in the Emmanuel African Methodist Church were gathered for a Bible reading. When a young man walked in, he was invited to join them. He did. And he joined that reading, and suddenly he opened fire. He killed 9 members of that church. Now, does that mean our churches are no longer safe? In 2016, at a gay nightclub called The Pulse in Orlando, Florida, 49 people were killed when a gunman opened fire on people who were just having a good time. At an outdoor concert in Las Vegas, Nevada in 2017, 58 people were killed and hundreds injured when a gunman opened fire from a hotel room above the concert. Are concerts no longer safe? These are just a few examples of events which could generate traumatic events over the last 21 years. Do you know that as of 2019, there were 230 school shootings in the United States since that first shooting in Columbine, Colorado in 1999? 230 shooting in places where we work. If, as Kim talked with us last week, one of our roles as educators is to help all of our students feel safe and supported, how do we deal with just a few of the examples I provided? How did or do you deal with the traumatic events I listed? How do your colleagues deal with the traumatic events? And what role do you play in helping your colleagues cope with traumatic events so that neither we nor our colleagues become so traumatized from events in our world that we cannot function, that we become so numb to what is happening that we are not there for ourselves, our colleagues, or our students? We are educators with great responsibility for our students, always. So when there is a trauma, globally, nationally, locally, or personally, we often may have a delayed response of our own to any traumatic event because we have been too busy tending to our students' needs. As educators, we have to remain calm and not let our anger, our frustration, our confusion, or fear impact our students because they already have their own responses. We can rely on our own resilience, our own resources, our colleagues, each other. The first day of all of my classes for the last several years that I taught, I asked my students where the door stopper was. They looked at me wondering where I was going with that question. I then proceeded to show them where it was and instructed them that if we ever heard of the sounds of shooting in the hallways outside our classroom, I would put the door stopper in place, remove my belt, wrap it around the hinge inside the door and cinch it, get them to help me move something heavy in front of the door and keep them away from the windows. I told them that they are my responsibility and their safety was something that I take very, very seriously. I wasn't trying to frighten them, but they needed to know that even in a small Catholic college in Vermont, there was always a chance of something like a shooting taking place. So exactly how do we deal with trauma? How do we keep trauma from traumatizing us today? Between the dual pandemics of the coronavirus and racism, the absolute uncertainty of what this fall will bring us on our campuses, and any personal events in our lives, events in our local community, events at the state or national level, or even global events, how do we prevent the numbing, paralyzing, destabilizing, run for the door moments? Here are some ideas. Number one, our resilience and understanding our resilience, our resourcefulness and understanding what our resources are, our ability to understand that events don't shape our lives. We view or respond to those events, and how we do that can and does often dictate our response. Again, our ability to understand that events don't shape our lives, how we view and respond to those events can and does often dictate our response. Our family, our close friends, our colleagues, our institutions can be a source of strength. Certainly they're a source of conflict too, but if there is a trauma, they can be a great source of strength. Stay off of Facebook. Stay off of Twitter. Over the years, as things have happened, the number of times that I've said to students in class, personally, wherever, it's okay to unplug. You do not have to follow the news 24/7, 365. It's okay. And for me, I watch Nicole Wallace every afternoon. I love the guests that she has on there. At the end, for the last 5 or 6 minutes, she does lives worth remembering. And she talks about people who died from the coronavirus. I can't watch that. It makes me overwhelmingly sad because I'm angry that so many people are dying and it did not have to happen. I'm not going to get into politics. So you don't have to always follow the news. Facebook is not necessarily, in fact, it often is not a very healthy place. And Kim did her whole dissertation on the impact of Facebook. Think back to some of the questions I asked you to think about at the start of the webinar. What are your responses, and can you or will you share this with family, friends, and colleagues? Will you talk to them about this seminar? Will you talk to them about what you're learning in this 5-series part on trauma and resilience? I would suggest that this is what I do, and it works great. Zoom or FaceTime or Skype with those you love and those who love you and support you. Share your concerns for your students, for yourselves, for your colleagues, so that you are not carrying all of that weight solely on your shoulders. Zoom with your other department members. with colleagues you value who are going through the same uncertainty as we all are, about the realities of education across this country and on your campus for the fall. That will really help you realize and accept the fact that you are not alone in this journey. And the last thing on this list of some ideas is find a counselor to talk with. I mean, I was a counselor at St. Michael's College for 24 years. I talk with a lot of students, but I also talk with a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends at the college. I still do. You know, since the pandemic has hit, since all of the issues around racism have been front and center, the number of phone calls that I've gotten from former students is amazing to me. And they just want to be able to process what they're experiencing. Of course, they cover it up by saying, Dave, we know that you're in the elderly category these days, so we just wanted to check on you because everybody says to check on the elderly. We laugh about that. And then they talk about how it's impacting them at home, at work, in their relationships. What's the coronavirus doing? Many of them are reading up on so many things about racism now, and they're finding that it's very challenging to themselves, and it's not fun. They're finding out that some of their ideas are racist, and they're trying to find a way to counteract those. That's why I strongly recommend the book, How to Become an Anti-Racist. It really is amazing. So finding a counselor to talk with is important. And you know, I have 2 wristbands. I don't wear jewelry, but I've worked a lot with Hope Happens Here, which was set up to work on the mental health of students, and particularly student athletes, but it's expanded and it's now a national program to help people deal with depression, anxiety, and suicide. In Mount Mansfield Union High School, Dave Marlowe is the AD there, and he's a former student of mine and a wonderful guy. And he asked me to talk with him and talk with their students, and so we did. And they have a wristband, and their wristband says, it's okay to not be okay. St. Mike's one says, as my t-shirt says, you are loved. So finding a counselor, finding someone to talk with, there's no stigma attached to that. There are really good people out there who can help us deal with that. So there are 7 ideas of what we can do, what you can do to be supportive of yourself, of your colleagues, and your students. And so I want to thank you for all that you do. We don't get enough of that. I want to thank you for all that you do. However you define yourself as an educator, thank you for what you do. You matter. You make a difference. You make a huge difference in the lives of your institution, your colleagues, and especially your students. Mike Samara was a vice president for student affairs, and he was the dean of students at St. Michael's College for many years. A very good man. And for a period of time, Mike Samara was my boss. He had several sayings on the wall of his office, and the one that clearly impacted me is something I have never forgotten. And I'll repeat this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Please keep that in mind as you continue forward as an educator in very difficult and important times. My email address is landersdave@comcast.net. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to respond to them or comments. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Dr. Kimberly Quinn. Thank you for your interest in the topic of trauma and resilience. And now, Kim.
Oh, Dave, just fantastic. You had me with, all the strategies, but I also like how you really encourage the processing piece, because it's really, how we think about what happens that matters, and that nobody says it's easy, that, no matter who you are on this earth, this is what I got from you, that we all want to be heard and validated. And that's really where the healing piece is, is in not feeling so alone with it. And you gave some fantastic tips. So let me just look here. I've got one, let's see. How do you think educators, all inclusive, as you said, so let's just say, how would we grown-ups expand our roles is to, better serve our students during this pandemic more efficiently?
I think it's a great question. I think one of the biggest things is, God gave us, one mouth and 2 ears. And we need to listen to our students. We need to engage with them, and we need to say, how are you doing? I know, Kim, in your classes, and I used to do this in my classes, we would do a go-around at the start of each class. How are you? What's going on? What can we do for you? Or we do a meditation. You know, it takes 2 minutes to do something like that. But part of it is that they see that we value them. They know that we care about them. And by doing that, yes, there can be a problem with that because they may start coming to us more and more. And not everybody is a counselor, but that's okay, because you need to know who the counselors are in your school. You need to know who the resources are in your community. So if they need to get something, if they need something more than what you can provide, you can refer them. But just being genuine and caring about students is going to go a long way towards helping them deal with what's going on in their worlds.
Okay, good answer there. And let's see, this is, I think, kind of ideal. Do you think our college students, again, ideally speaking, should be trauma informed? And if so, how, maybe long-term, like how do you think colleges and universities should go about this?
I think again, another good question. I think that they do need to be informed about trauma, because one of the things is that if you don't know what's going on, if you don't know that trauma is part of our life, and I'll go back to one of the things I said right at the beginning, helping students to understand that everyone experiences trauma. It's a part of life. But too often people feel that every trauma ends up being traumatic, numbing, destabilizing, and paralyzing. It doesn't have to be. How we view and how we respond to these events can and does often dictate our response. Helping our students understand that they're the ones who are in control. They're the ones who can make a decision of whether they're going to be curled up in the corner, or they're going to run screaming from the classroom, or they're going to go, no, I'm going to become an activist. I'm going to take care of things. I'm going to do things differently. And so we empower our students, and the more that we empower them, the better they are. I think that's a key to what we're talking about.
Okay, awesome. Wow. Also, I'm thinking about connection, Dave, and as we know how we're all wired for it, no matter how introverted or extroverted or whatever we're dealing with, we're hardwired for some connection, right? And
Yes.
Right now in colleges, we're kind of saying, come here, go away, right? So we're inviting you back, but there was 6 students in a classroom and masks and stay way over here. And how do you think, again, grown-ups, all inclusive, how do you think we can help to manage it? It's a messy situation, right? How do you think we can do our best to manage the come here, go away thing with students to help them be connected at a time that's promoting disconnection?
And again, another great question, and I think that's going to be the real challenge, especially for colleges and universities, because we also know developmentally, young people have a tendency to go, nothing's going to happen to me. I'm going to be fine. It's not going to impact me. And so I think while we may hope that we're going to open up schools in the fall, it may change. But the whole difference between social distancing and physical distancing. So right now, I physically distance myself from everybody. I mean, I see very few people. I live by myself. I see very few people. However, I Zoom, I Skype, I FaceTime, I text, I call people. So helping students to understand that they need to continue to be connected, and giving them, as educators, giving them a way to connect with us so that they know that if they have something going on in their life, there is a person who cares enough about them to say, here's how you get in touch with me. Because it is that social connection that is so important. And yes, the physical connection. I saw my friend Jenny Sanolia from St. Mike's. I've known Jenny for 38 years. I love Jenny. Jenny loves me. And I know Jenny and her husband and the kids. And I saw her at the grocery store. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. It was the senior hour they give, for the elderly, right? But here's Jenny, and Jenny and I have always hugged. Here she is with a mask, with gloves on. Here I am with a mask and gloves on, and our carts met. I couldn't hug her. She couldn't hug me. We always hug. And it is that reality. That's what we're going through right now. But also helping them to understand that eventually it's going to get better. And if we all wear masks, if we do the social distancing, I prefer it to be physical distancing, we're going to get through this, and it's going to change. But if you isolate yourself and you don't make those connections, again, Zooming or FaceTime or whatever, then we're all going to pay a pretty high price for that.
Excellent. All right. So lastly, Dr. Landers,
Yeah.
what do you think colleges can do, sort of from an infrastructure standpoint? I guess this kind of sounds kind of like too much, but can do to help grown-ups, all inclusive, kind of form ways or help, like how do you think colleges can help employees, grown-ups, kind of get together and connect ourselves and also realize that this is affecting our own self-regulation, right? Which is
Yes.
affecting, so how can we process this, in maybe like a structured kind of way?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of ways to do it. And one of the things is that there's a common situation that we're all involved in, that you're all involved in, I'm retired, that you're all involved with. And part of that is, what are the other members of your department doing? And are you Zooming with the other members of your department? If you know who your students are going to be in the fall, are you connecting with them? But how do you stay connected to the other people within your institution? And how does your institution stay connected? So the transparency is what's so important. So at St. Mike's, President Starrett was all set to send out a notice to everybody about what the regulations were going to be to open up in the fall. And she then very honestly said in an email, I was all set to hit the button and send when the governor's office changed all the rules. So I couldn't send it. Now, she could have sent it out and not explained that to us. The best thing that she did was explain that to us. And I know that at St. Mike's, and sorry for the bias there, but that's the one I know best. I know right now St. Mike's is engaged in some amazing, amazing discussions about race. And there's a group of people who are doing readings and they're getting together and they're talking with each other. And it's all through Zoom. And it's really facing what the challenges are that we're going to have. And it's again, not doing it in isolation. And if you do it in isolation, you're going to get hurt. If you do it together, it's like Kim and the stuff that you do with mindfulness. You open it up to not just the students, but to the whole school. All of Champlain College was invited to that. And that's how we have to keep doing it. We recognize what the issues are. Again, the pandemic of racism, the pandemic of the coronavirus, how the national administration is not dealing with it. And I promised I wouldn't go there, but I won't. So I won't. But by staying connected with people and not letting someone slip away. And if you haven't heard from somebody that's in your department or in your school that say, hey, how are you doing? It's a simple thing. One of the things that happens when I was a counselor, students would come in and they had experienced a death of a loved one or some horrible thing. And they would say, my friends haven't asked me how I'm doing. Nobody's saying anything. Why is that happening? They'd come to counseling for that. And I would say, they don't know what to say. And what I've said to people over the years is, just say, I don't know what to say. I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. It is that simple. Because right now we're being divided and we're being pushed apart. It's up to us to bring ourselves and our colleagues and our students together.
Well, excellent, Dr. Landers. I think you've done a fabulous, fabulous talk. So I'd first of all like to thank you for so generously donating your time and to have this conversation with lots of different college communities, actually. Yeah. And again, to thank the attendees for choosing to use your life minutes in this way, because that's the intention there is huge, because it's bigger than us, right? For our students and also young adult children and little children, maybe, if you're here for that. Thank you again to Champlain College for, yes, you are loved. Thank you again to Champlain College for hosting and for all the good people in our community who are a part of this. And then lastly, another shout out to St. Mike's, because they did play a key role in getting the word out there too. So hopefully we will see you next week for Neela Anderson DeSell, who will be doing her talk through storytelling, trauma and storytelling. It's called No Words. Yeah, the oxymoron of trauma. Thank you, everyone.